It was a cold and moonless night, and I found myself lying in bed, unable to move a muscle. The room was shrouded in darkness, and the weight of an unseen presence pressed down on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I was trapped in my own body, a prisoner of my own mind. I could hear faint whispers in the shadows, indistinct voices that seemed to be mocking me. They grew louder and more sinister, their words a cacophony of malevolent laughter and taunts. I struggled to scream, to call for help, but my vocal cords were paralyzed, and only a feeble whimper escaped my lips. As I lay there, my heart raced, and I felt an overwhelming sense of impending doom. The room seemed to grow colder, and the air was heavy with a suffocating dread. I tried to move my fingers, my toes, anything to break free from this nightmarish grip, but my body remained unresponsive. Then I saw it, a shadowy figure, tall and gaunt, materializing at the foot of my bed. Its eyes were empty voids, and a twisted grin stretched across its face. It began to creep towards me, inch by agonizing inch, its presence radiating malevolence. The whispers grew louder, the voices now a cacophony of torment, and the figure drew nearer. It reached out its bony hand, icy fingers grazing my skin. I felt a searing pain, as if it was trying to tear my very soul from my body. Tears welled up in my eyes as I continued to struggle, to break free from this living nightmare. In the darkness I begged for release, for the paralysis to end. But the figure inched closer, its fingers closing around my throat, choking the life out of me. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, I finally managed to jerk my body awake. I gasped for air, drenched in sweat, and the room was empty. The weight on my chest lifted and the whispers faded into nothingness. I lay there, trembling. For what felt like an eternity, the remnants of the nightmarish experience still haunting my every thought. It was a sleep paralysis episode I would never forget, a descent into a terrifying realm where reality and nightmare intertwined, leaving me forever changed by the horrors I had faced. Caroline had always been a skeptic when it came to the supernatural. She dismissed tales of ghosts, demons, and otherworldly beings as mere flights of fancy. But one fateful night, her skepticism would crumble in the face of a horrifying encounter with sleep paralysis. It began with an ordinary evening. Caroline had just gone to bed, tired after a long day at work. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt an unusual sense of unease settling over her. It was as if the room had grown heavy, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking in the shadows. The next thing she knew, Caroline was awake, or so she thought. She couldn't move, couldn't even blink. Panic welled up inside her as she realized she was trapped in her own body. She desperately tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. Her heart pounded, and her breath quickened. As her eyes darted around the room, she saw a figure standing at the foot of her bed. It was a grotesque and twisted silhouette, with hollow eyes that seemed to bore into her soul. Its presence was suffocating, and Caroline felt a malevolence radiating from it that chilled her to the core. The figure began to move closer, its footsteps echoing ominously in the room. Caroline's mind raced with fear, and she fought against the paralysis that bound her. But her efforts were futile. Her body remained unresponsive. She could only watch in terror as the figure drew nearer. The room grew darker with each passing moment, and Caroline felt an oppressive weight on her chest. She was sure that the figure intended to harm her, and her dread reached its zenith as it reached out a long skeletal hand, fingers outstretched, as if to grasp her. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, Caroline finally managed to break free from the paralysis. She gasped for air, drenched in sweat, and the room was empty. The figure had vanished, leaving her room shrouded in an eerie silence. Caroline couldn't shake the memory of that night, and her skepticism had crumbled in the face of the inexplicable terror she had experienced. It was a sleep paralysis episode she would never forget, a nightmarish encounter that left her questioning the boundary between the real and the supernatural, and forever changed her view of the world. It was just like any other night. I had gone to bed, tired after a long day, and fell into a deep slumber. However, my peaceful sleep was soon shattered by a sinister and surreal experience that would haunt me for years. I awoke to the sound of a distant, irregular tapping. It was a noise that didn't belong in my room, and I was immediately filled with a sense of dread. I couldn't move, couldn't even open my eyes, though I was aware of my surroundings. I was trapped within my own body, a helpless observer of the nightmare that was unfolding. As the tapping grew louder, it became clear that it was coming from within the room, and it was approaching my bed. I strained my ears to identify the source, but my mind was clouded with fear, and my vision remained locked in the darkness. Suddenly, a shadowy figure emerged at the edge of my vision. It was a tall, indistinct silhouette, moving closer to my paralyzed body, with each passing second. My heart raced, and I desperately tried to scream, to move, to do anything to escape the impending horror. But my limbs refused to obey. The figure reached the foot of my bed, and I felt a cold, unnatural chill radiating from its presence. It leaned over me, its face concealed in darkness, and I could sense its malevolent intent. I was filled with a suffocating terror as it whispered incomprehensible words, a sinister incantation that seemed to pierce my very soul. The room grew darker, and an oppressive weight pressed down on my chest, making it nearly impossible to breathe. I could feel a malicious energy enveloping me, and I was convinced that this malevolent presence meant to harm me. As I struggled with all my might, I finally managed to break free from the paralysis, gasping for air. The room was empty, the tapping had ceased, and the nightmarish figure had disappeared into the void. I was left trembling in my bed, haunted by the vivid and horrifying encounter. It took me a long time to convince myself that it was just a night terror, a product of my mind playing tricks on me during sleep paralysis. Still, the memory of that night continues to send shivers down my spine, a reminder of the very real terror that sleep paralysis can evoke. Marissa had been suffering from sleep paralysis for several years, and the experience had grown increasingly distressing. Night after night, she found herself trapped in her own body, unable to move or speak, while an eerie dark figure watched her from the corner of her room. She couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was malevolent, its presence radiating an aura of dread and fear. It was always there, lurking in the shadows, a silent witness to her terrifying ordeal. Marissa had finally mustered the courage to seek help from a sleep specialist, driven by desperation to put an end to these relentless nightmares. Dr. Mitchell, a renowned sleep specialist, listened intently as Marissa recounted her harrowing experiences. He reassured her that sleep paralysis, although terrifying, was a natural phenomenon with a scientific explanation. He explained that during sleep paralysis, the brain awakens from REM sleep, but the body remains temporarily paralyzed, preventing physical movement. The dark figure, he noted, was likely a hallucination, a result of her mind being in a half-awake, half-asleep state. It was a common element in sleep paralysis experiences and not something to be feared. Nevertheless, Dr. Mitchell understood that the fear was real and suggested several strategies to mitigate the episodes. He recommended improving her sleep hygiene, emphasizing the importance of a consistent sleep schedule, and creating a relaxing bedtime routine. He also advised her to reduce stress in her life and incorporate relaxation techniques into her daily routine. For cases where sleep paralysis persisted, he discussed the option of prescribing medication as a last resort. Marissa diligently followed Dr. Mitchell's advice. She established a regular sleep pattern, engaged in mindfulness meditation, and practiced progressive muscle relaxation. Over time, her sleep paralysis episodes became less frequent and less intense. She even started to perceive the dark figure as a product of her own mind, rather than a sinister presence in her room. One night, as she lay in bed, the paralysis once again gripped her. But this time, her perspective had changed. She saw the dark figure, but instead of fear, she felt a sense of detachment. She realized that it was indeed a creation of her own mind, a manifestation of her anxiety and fear. With newfound clarity, Marissa gradually regained control over her body. She pushed through the paralysis and sat up in bed, staring at the once menacing figure. As she did, it slowly dissipated into the darkness, leaving her room devoid of the malevolent presence that had tormented her for so long. Marissa's journey wasn't without its challenges, but with the guidance of Dr. Mitchell and her determination to overcome her fear, she managed to conquer her sleep paralysis and the ominous figure that had haunted her nights. It was a testament to the power of understanding, self-care, and the resilience of the human spirit.